Hello, wonderful, amazing, fantastic algebra students. This is Miss Youngblood here, bringing you today's video, which will be on session 1 for the week of May 22nd through May 29th. So let's hop on the Google Classroom and see what we're learning about today. So on Google Classroom, again, we are in Content Week, May 22nd through 29th, talking about quadratic equations. For this first session, we're going to be going over how to graph quadratic equations. So if we click on the session, we're going to click on Khan Academy and do the 2 assignments that are scheduled to be completed by Thursday, May 28th. So these 2 assignments right here. We're going to start with the zero product property. So if you're following along on the video, make sure you're on this first assignment, zero product property. So this idea of the zero product property basically means that we're going to use one of the most important features of zero. Zero is a very powerful number because the only way you can obtain zero through multiplication is by multiplying by zero. So there's no way we can multiply 2 numbers that aren't zero and get zero. So let's actually see what that means and how we're going to use that property to help us solve these problems. So for my first problem, it asks us to find the zeros of the function, and it gives us this function h of x equals negative 4x minus 3. We're going to go ahead and copy that over to our sketchpad. Here's the function we were asked to focus on, and we're asked to find the zeros. So basically what this question is asking us is to set this function equal to 0 and figure out what x values will make it equal 0. So we want to set this equal to 0. In order to solve this equation or this function, we have to set both of these factors equal to 0 separately. And that is basically the zero product property. In order for this whole thing to equal 0, either this part has to equal 0 or this part equals 0. So there are 2 different x values that will make this equation equal 0. The first equation we need to solve is negative 4x minus 3 equals 0. And the second equation we need to solve is x minus 3 equals 0. So for our first equation, we would add 3 to both sides. So we would get negative 4x equals positive 3. Divide by negative 4. So x equals negative 3 over 4. So that is our first solution. That is our first x value that will make this equation equal 0. Therefore, negative 3/4 is a 0 for this function. Our next equation we need to solve is x minus 3 equals 0. So all we need to do is add 3 to both sides. So we would get x equals positive 3. So that's our second 0. Again, these are the 2 x values that will make this function equal to 0. So in Khan Academy, it asks that you put the smallest answer first. So this is our smallest answer. So we're going to type that answer first. And I'll show you how to type it into Khan Academy on the last problem. So we're just going to go ahead to our next problem. In this next problem, it's already set equal to 0 for us. So we can jump straight to splitting it into 2 equations. X minus 7 equals 0, and negative 4x minus 2 equals 0. So for this first one, we're going to add 7 to both sides. So we'll get x equals positive 7 for our first solution, our first x value. For our second equation, we need to add 2 to both sides. So negative 4x equals positive 2. Then divide both sides by negative 4. So x equals negative 2/4. In Khan Academy, they ask that you reduce fractions that are able to be reduced. So 2/4, we know we can divide the 2 and 4 by 2. To reduce that fraction to negative 1/2. So negative 1/2 is going to be our other solution. Again, in Khan Academy, they ask that you put the smallest answer first. So this will be our smallest. So negative 1/2 and x equals 7 is what we would type in. And this will be our last problem in the set. So we're asked to find the zeros of this function. F of x equals x minus 3 times 2x minus 8. To find the zeros just means we're going to set the function equal to 0. And in order to solve this equation, we need to split it into two equations. X minus 3 equals 0. And 2x minus 8 equals 0. So for this equation, we're going to add 3 to both sides. So we get x equals 3. For this equation, we're going to add 8 to both sides. So 2x equals 8. Divide by 2. So x equals 4. So our two solutions to this equation, our two zeros for this function, are going to be x equals 3 and x equals 4. And again, Khan Academy asked that we put the smallest value in the first box. So 3 is smaller than 4. So we're going to go ahead and switch back to our browser because this is our last problem. So we have 3 and we have 4. Zoom out. And that's our last problem. We just completed our first assignment, the zero product property. The next assignment for this session on graphing quadratics is actually graphing quadratics in factored form. We're still going to use this idea of the zero product property, so that's why it was important that we did that assignment first. So now we're graphing quadratics in factored form. So you have 4 problems. I've already done my first one with the kids in my class, so I'm going to just go to the second one. So for this problem, we have this function, negative 3/8 y equals negative 3/8 times x plus 5 times x minus 3. So let's move this over to our sketch pad and see how we're going to work with that. The easiest way to graph quadratic functions when they're written in this way is to find the zeros. So we're basically going to use the same method we used in these problems. Set it equal to 0 and find the zeros of the function. So set this equal to 0. So to find our first 0, we would do x plus 5 equals 0. Subtract 5 from both sides. So our first 0 is going to be negative 5. And then for our second one, we would have x minus 3 equals 0. Add 3 to both sides. So our second 0 is going to be 3. But now since we're actually graphing the equation, we're going to have some more work to do. So I'm going to go through this first problem step by step and use the Desmos calculator because I know most of you are familiar with that. For the other 2 problems, I'll be using my calculator, but I will show you how to graph them in all the examples. So we have x equals negative 5. So that means one of our zeros will be negative 5, and the other 0 is going to be 3. So in order to accurately graph this quadratic equation, we need to figure out what point is in the middle so that we can set our vertex for the parabola as well. So the vertex is the point where the parabola or the graph of the quadratic equation curves. So we want to set that point based on this equation and these x-intercepts. So the vertex, the turning point for a parabola, is always right in the middle of these 2 values. So if we look at these numbers, we have negative 5 and 3. You want to think about in your head what number is in between, right in between negative 5 and 3. There are multiple ways that you could do this. You could find the median. So we could do negative 5 plus 3, which gets us negative 2, and divide that by 2 to get negative 1. So we know it's negative 1 based on that math we just did on our head. Or we can switch back to our browser and actually look at this graph. So if we look at this graph, we want the value to be in between negative 5 and 1. So 1 is here, and we want the x value to be in between negative 5 and 1. So let's say my x value was way over here at negative 5. if it's at -5, well, the other half of the graph is way over here. We want this half of the graph to be going through -5, so we need to shift it to the right. So now we see it's at -9. Again, we want it at -5, so we're going to shift it again. -7, not quite. Shift it one more time. So now the zeros of the function are at -5 and 1, and that happens when x is at -2. Now, it seems like I might have misinterpreted it. I think it was at 3, actually. Because I believe my final answer was -1. Yes, -5 and +3. So again, the x-intercept is at 3 and at -5. So the x value that is in the middle that gives those two x-intercepts is -1. So that's another way you could use to find the x value of the vertex or the point in the middle. Okay. So now that we have the x value, we need to find its y value. In order to do that, we're going to plug in this -1 into these x values. So our equation is going to be y equals -3/8 times -1 plus 5 times -1. Let me just zoom out so we can just all see it. -1 minus 3. So again, all we did was change these x values to this number, -1. So now we're going to solve this equation using our graphing calculator. So again, we're just typing in the function we just had. So that was -3/8 times -1 plus 5 times -1 minus 3. So when we type that in, I just want to take a moment to verify I typed it in correctly. Yes. When we type that in, the y value gets us 6. So our y value is going to equal 6. So our point is going to be -1, +6. So if we go back to our graph, we need to graph that last point, -1, +6. Let's try the next one. So for these next problems, I'll do the whole thing in the sketch and then switch back to the browser at the end so you can see what the graph looks like. This is the next problem we're working with. So we have the function f of x equals -2/3 times x plus 1 times x minus 5. So we're going to start it the same way by finding the zeros. X plus 1 equals 0. X minus 5 equals 0. Subtract 1 from both sides. So x equals -1. Add 5 to both sides. So x equals 5. So our two zeros are going to be -1, 0 and 5, 0. So now we need to figure out what x value is in between -1 and 5. In my head, I just figured out that was 2. Again, you can also take the time to go to the graph on Khan Academy and figure it out. So move the point over to 5, move the vertex over until the next point is at -1. So you just kind of play with it. Or you could do the math. That's what I did. So I did 5 plus -1 is 4. 4 divided by 2 is 2. So that's where this 2 came from. So I can add those notes here. 5 plus -1 divided by 2. That's where that 2 came from. That's the median, the number in the middle. So now we need to plug in this 2 for x. So we're going to have f of 2. So remember, this is the exact same thing as y, but I want you guys to get used to seeing that f of that function notation. So f of 2 equals -2/3 times 2 plus 1 times 2 minus 5. So all we did was plug in this 2 in for those x's. So for our final answer, I'm going to go ahead and type in this calculator because it's a little quicker. 2 divided by 3 times 3 times negative 3. So our final answer should be 6. So that means the vertex is going to be 2, 6. So we need to have negative 1, 0, 2, 6, and 5, 0. Oh my goodness. I believe I was in the browser this whole time. So here's the work that I was kind of talking through. So here I found the zeros, x equals negative 1, x equals 5. So these are the 2 zeros. Here I found the vertex. I solved for the x value and got 2. And I plugged this 2 into the function to get 6. So during that whole time, this is what I was writing. I was on the wrong screen. My apologies. So take a moment and look this over if you need to, but I'm going to switch back to the browser. 2, 6 is our vertex. So we need to be at negative 1 and 5. So if I bring this down to 5, we already got that the vertex was 2, positive 6. So we need to go up to 6. So we see the 2 zeros are 5 and negative 1, and the vertex is 2, 6. All right, last question. Okay, so this is our last problem. F of x equals 5/9 times x plus 9 times x plus 3. So we're going to start it the same way. Find the zeros. So our 2 zeros will be x plus 9 equals 0 and x plus 3 equals 0. You can subtract 9 for both sides for the first equation. So the first 0 is x equals negative 9. And then subtract 3 from both sides for the second equation. So the second equation, or the second 0 is x equals negative 3. So our 2 zeros will be negative 9, 0 and negative 3, 0. So those are the 2 points that the graph touches the x-axis. To find the vertex, the point in the middle, to find that x value, we have to think about what number is right in the middle of negative 9 and negative 3. So in my head, I'm going to quickly do negative 9 plus negative 3 divided by 2, which gets me negative 6. Again, you could also visualize that. So negative 6 is 3 away from negative 9 and 3 away from negative 3. So now to find the y value, we're going to plug this negative 6 in for x in the original function. So for our original function, we're going to have f of negative 6. Remember, that just means y, so you don't have to write that part. I don't want you guys to be afraid of it. 5/9 times negative 6 plus 9 times negative 6 plus 3. Okay, so now I'm just going to type this into the calculator to solve it. So we have 5 divided by 9 times negative 6 plus 9 times negative 6 plus 3. So that gets us a y value of negative 5. So our y value for our vertex is negative 5. So these are the 3 points we need for our quadratic equation. Negative 9, 0, negative 6, negative 5, and negative 3, 0. So if we switch back to our browser, we need negative 9, 0. Okay, so this is a mistake you might make. So you see I tried to move this point over to be one of my zeros, but as I'm moving this point, it's actually showing that that point needs to be my vertex. So again, we said our vertex was negative 6, negative 5. So we need to bring it down, negative 6, negative 5, right? So x is -6, y is -5. And then our two zeros were -9 and 3. So I actually happened to pick a point that was still on there, but you want it to be as accurate as possible. So we said -3 and -9 were the two zeros. So I have a point at one of the zeros and a point at the vertex, -6, -5. If we zoom out, that's our answer. So we just finished that for algebra. So I believe that was our last assignment in algebra. Yep, so we just knocked out these two assignments for the first session. So that concludes the content portion of this video. Make sure you do those two assignments as well as the weekly check-in for this week. You can watch this video if you need more specific information about the expectations for this week. Keep in mind that all Khan Academy assignments, test corrections, anything from quarter 3 or quarter 4 needs to be turned in by June 5th at the latest. So June 5th is my last day to take any work, so that I can cut off grades and let you know where you stand before you're gone for the summer. Or June 8th, I'm sorry, June 8th, it's Monday. So let's do by that Monday so that you have the weekend to work on it in case you are working. So that Monday, June 8th, is when all assignments are due. If you need help with test corrections, getting caught up on Khan Academy, please let me know. Keep in mind, this is the last official Khan Academy problem set. So the Khan Academy problems for this next session, I'm going to make extra credit just because my 1A and 3B students missed out on their class on Monday due to Memorial Day. So this second session will be extra credit. I'll still record a video tomorrow after I go through it with my 2A, 1B class. Make sure you're abiding by the daily schedule. You know, you should be going to 2 classes a day, each day, checking in with these teachers. And then Friday, you just have an hour to check in with whoever you need to or get extra help from whoever you need. I thank you so much for taking this time to watch this video. Hope that you and your family are safe and doing well. Please feel free to text me, email me if you have any questions, reach out, I'm here. Don't just suffer in silence, just ask for help if you need it. Again, thank you for watching this video, and I will see you or hear from you soon. Bye.